Hey, what's up, B fam? Welcome to another episode. Today, you are in for a treat because we have a special guest. We have Holly from the Well Blended Life. She is going to come on here and talk to you about parenting after dark. And if you're like, what the heck does that mean? You got to stick with us because she's going to break it all down. But especially if you are parents of teenagers or young adults that still live in your house, this is an episode that you don't want to miss. And then she has a special bonus tip for us of how to keep our kids bully free. So stick with us. We'll be right back. All right, guys. So, are you excited and ready for this? I'm going to let Holly introduce herself here in just a minute, but I want to give just a little bit of background about Holly. Her Instagram, which is where I met her, is all about her chronic illness. She is a chronic illness problem solver and shares life hacks. That's actually how I came to find her because I was just scrolling the social media one day and there was this life hack for a dishwasher for like taking in all the moisture in the dishwasher. And I was like, oh, heck yeah, let me try that. So I started trying it out and following her page, and she shares the best life hacks. And she is also a podcast host. It's called The Cook Who Can't Eat. And she talks about blended family life, chronic illness life, and then some very delicious recipes as well. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to let Holly share a little bit more about her and her blended family dynamic.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I have followed you guys for a long time and it was really nice. I know we've talked a little in DMs, so it's always good when we get to do something like that. Like you said, my name is Holly. My Instagram is Well Blended Life, and I focus on chronic illness, recipes, accessible cooking, accessible living, anything that can just make life a little easier by saving time, energy, or money. Because whether you have a chronic illness, a blended family, or parents or not, we all only have so much time. 100% doesn't multiply.
Mm.
So anything where we can shortcut those necessary, mundane parts of life is pretty good because then we can take that energy, time, or money and spend it on the things that truly matter to us. So, my blended family is about 9 years old now, and we have 7 kids between the ages of 14 and 24. It's a lot. We don't all live in the same house, obviously. We do have some older ones. We've got college age kids, ones that are out on their own. We've still got high schoolers, and we've got one getting ready to start high school. Now, what's really interesting is that there's no hours other than our fur babies, but even before we met, how our families came to be were very interesting. His family has a private adoption, miracle of science, and all of those kind of wonderful blessings there. And then 3 foster to adopt kids. And then for me, my 2 kids are actually half siblings. So it's really interesting to see all the dynamics. But when you get a picture of us all together, we still somehow all look like we should be in the same family.
Well, I didn't know that about your family, and I don't know that I've really talked with or interviewed anybody else whose blended family came about with the adoption and the foster adopt
Mhm.
as well in there, because I know that's our fourth one, which is our oldest one, but she was the last one to enter in our family, was also an unofficial foster to adopt. So those situations bring their own challenges in, and now that family, like, there's already the issues if they're coming into what you would call your nuclear family, and now dividing that up and multiplying. Really, you're multiplying the different people to love them, but I know that's not always the case. So do you see different situations, like I guess the different struggles for the different types of ways they came into your family?
So I don't so much see issues or differences in how they came in. It's more of where they came from. We have some biological information, and we do start to see some of those traits that we now have to uh, deal with or manage and help our kiddo kind of navigate through
Mhm.
because of the genetic makeup that they came to us with. Now, I wasn't here when they joined the family, obviously, but they were all fostered to adopted as babies. So this is really the only family they've ever known. So that helps. But it is really interesting to see the different dynamics based on, you could see some of that biological stuff really bleeding in.
So when y'all were all in the house, when you were still raising them in their childhood ish into their preteen, what was y'all's custody, or how often were they in the home with y'all?
So my two kids, we have my two kids are 100% of the time. I always have them. Um, his kids, they in the very beginning, they went to their mom's house every other weekend. She was, they didn't really have a place to go where she was living, so they just went over there then. Then as they got older, they kind of did a week on, week off, and now that they're all, I mean, they're 15, 16, 18, 21, and 24, they kind of just decide where they want to be. And we just respect that because they're all old enough to make their decisions. We have one that's pretty much lived with us the whole time. We have two that pretty much live with their mom because that's the interaction that they're needing right now. So sometimes they come stay here. We just let that be a little more fluid as
Oh,
they've gotten older, at least.
I love that. I wish I would have been able to be better at that when the kids were at that age to be able to make some decisions. There were some circumstances in our family where it wasn't always the best thing for them to be able to take that lead, but
Mhm.
I'm not sure that even if they could have, if my pride could have got past that, because I was not able to let go of my pride of thinking that if I didn't have my kids 24/7 and the typical, like, I have them full custody, they go every other weekend to the other parent, that it didn't mean that I was a bad mom. Like, I that in my
Mhm.
head, that's what it meant, and it wasn't until they moved out, went to go live with their other parents that I then realized that it was no reflection. I mean, there were things I could have changed, but it's okay when you have 2 sets of houses to let the kids, make those decisions and stuff. So I love that y'all have got to the place where you can do that, and I'm sure that helps with your kids just emotionally and mentally and all of that as well.
Yeah, it does. I'll be honest, it's not always easy. It's um, they're here and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we want to go back to our mom's house. It's a little bit of a pride like blow.
Mm.
And as the stepmom, I'm going, oh, did I do something wrong? What did I do? Like, did they not, and you kind of go through that cycle in your head. Because one of the things that makes our family dynamic tricky, and it always has, is that I have kids that I parent, and and he has kids that he was parenting. Now, with their mom, her significant other that she ended up marrying, um, he never had kids. So there was no one else in the home that was trying to parent. So we had two sets of kids that had a parent with different parenting techniques and styles, like night and day, but we're all in the same house. So how do we figure out how to hold everyone accountable to some of the same rules and expectations and things like that? while adjusting to what they've always grown up with and what their individual needs are without fostering resentment and arguments and all of that. So it's been a very, very hard tight wire or high wire to traverse. And I will be the first to admit that we have not always done it well or successfully. And I take a lot of that blame on myself, but we're doing the best we can. There is no, they always say that no matter how hard you push, your kids didn't come with an instruction manual. When you blend your family, you need an instruction manual that couldn't have filled that hospital you gave birth in, and there's not one that exists. So it has been a very hard dynamic managing that. Um,
Y-
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see that. And I think probably most step families, step moms, bonus moms, whatever we want to label ourselves,
Mhm.
would say pretty much the same thing. I mean, you have to come with some very specific situations for it just to happen so beautifully and magically, and that's not usually what takes place. And I think we are all doing the best we can. But I love that your situation, we know you have some like tried and true methods because you have these teens that you have raised now. They have come up. You didn't raise them alone. It was a group effort, but you coined this parenting after dark, or at least I've never heard it anywhere else. And when I was listening to your podcast, and I heard you talking about that, I immediately said, I've got to have Holly on the podcast and talk about this because parenting our teenagers is, in our family, it was the hardest time of parenting. We had our pastor before would say, like, I love the teenage years. They were the best. And in my head, I thought, I'm going to follow his lead and I'm going to do what he did. And it it did not work, but he also came from a nuclear family, and here we were with our step family, and they had other influences, outside influences, different um things just kind of feeding into that. And so it was so rough. And so when I heard your tips, some of those tips I had heard before, and some I didn't hear until after my kids were already like out of my house. Because for us, unfortunately, when they turned 14, 15, they decided we want to go live with our other parents. And as hard as we fought to keep them in our home, even like legally, it just didn't, it didn't, we could not keep that grip on them. We couldn't keep them in the house. We couldn't stop them from leaving. Nothing that we tried legally or just relationally was able to keep that from happening. So a lot of these things that you talked about, I didn't have the opportunity to try them out during those years, but when they each came back around that 17, 18, then I've seen some of these methods that I've been able to put into practice, like tried and true, and actually work. So, will you share with us your parenting after dark and just break down a little bit of like what that is and what it looks like in your home?
Absolutely. So what was interesting is that so my blended family has been together for 9 years now, but we've only been living together for about 3.5. We were still working out of two different households. There was just so many kids and so many moving pieces and lots of different things. So I have always been a single mom with my daughter and mostly with my son. And so I had a very specific way that I was raising them. And as my daughter was becoming a teenager, I was trying to parent when I had time because I was a single mom. I was working full time in a job that had me traveling 60% of the time, volunteered for every committee in the world. I had a younger kid, relationships, step kids, like all this stuff. So when it got to be like right after dinner, I wanted to go to bed. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to do anything. I could barely even just drive the carpool. But when COVID happened, around that same time is when I actually got really sick. And it had nothing to do with COVID. It just was this weird timing coincidence.
Mm.
But my daughter at that stage, we actually had two of them, one mine, one his. They were seniors in high school and they left for spring break and never got to go back. Luckily, they used that time, you know, to the best of their ability. They went and got extra jobs, things like that, saved up just because they knew they were starting college that next semester. But I would try and talk to them all day long or parent them or have a conversation and nothing. They would come home from work at midnight and all of a sudden they'd be sitting at the end of my bed and wouldn't shut up. I'm going, okay, there's something here. Like, there's something I got to do here. Now, even well before this, we had already put in place a couple things. And I started realizing that, huh, okay, I get it. Teenagers are, for the most part, somehow just biologically night owls. We're all naturally morning people or night owls. I'm a night person. I do not understand mornings. But, and at that point in time, days and weeks and time didn't really matter. No one was leaving for work. No one was leaving for school. There wasn't really any school. Like, there was just nothing. And so I started saying, you know what? I'm not going to go to sleep until my daughter gets home. And she would come home. She'd go wash up because, germs, me, all that stuff. She'd come in my room, she'd plop herself at the end of the bed, and she'd sit there and talk. And eventually, I started noticing my son starting to come in and join us. And we would sit there and talk until like 2 o'clock in the morning, going, okay, so now I've got both of them talking at this time of night. Like, wait a minute, what's going on? I slowly started doing things like adding a card game. Like, well, we're all sitting here. You guys want to play Uno or you want to play whatever? And during those talks is when I learned so much about my kids. All of a sudden, I wasn't parenting on my schedule. I was parenting when they were able to be parented. During the day, they were busy. They were talking to their friends. They were, figuring stuff out or whatever. They were working. They didn't want to hear what I had to say about the rules or, hey, you got to put your dishes away or whatever it is. But at 1 o'clock in the morning, when they're just sitting in my bed talking, I could bring it up and they're like, yeah, I've just been so tired lately. And all of a sudden, I would know the story behind what's been going on. So it just kind of all clicked that that's what I needed to do. I needed to start following my kids' lead on when they would be the most parentable. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it really is genius. And I think something you said right there, because you make yourself available and then they start opening up. And I think so much in our mom world and mind, we see we see the outcome or we see, what's on the surface level. And there's so much deeper behind that that we don't realize why they do or don't do certain things. And a lot of times they're not willing to open up and tell us, especially when our habit is to nag, 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 do this, don't do this. Why didn't you do this? And jump on them really quick for the things that we're noticing on the surface level. When if you have that opportunity to go deeper into that conversation, you can see like, oh, like sometimes they're going through some stuff that we have no idea that they're going through because we haven't given them the opportunity. And if we are always like talking at them, then they're like, well, why would I tell them anymore? They're just gonna this, or this. And they already have in their head how you're gonna handle it. And so they just decide, okay, let me not say anything. So that right there, being available is, and just in the nighttime out. I mean, summertime is perfect right now for that, right? I mean, you probably don't want a 1 a.m. during a school night kind of thing. And the situations were a little bit different then with COVID and all of that. But being able to make yourself available and then have those conversations, because so many times our kids, they have their headphones in, they got their phone in their hand, you're trying to ask them, how was this? Good. But then letting them take that lead and they're coming to you and just being available. I love that. So what else? I think that's part one, right? Is like make yourself available.
And then I started looking back too, because, at this point, my daughter was almost 18. And I started realizing that it was something about the darkness. And I started looking back and going, okay, when I used to drive carpool, on the way there, the kids were buried in their phone or buried in their homework or doing whatever. But on the way home, when it was pitch black, they would talk and they would tell each other things. And I think we all have that. Sometimes when the lights go out, you can finally say something out loud that feels too heavy or too painful or too scary to say in the light of day, or
Mhm.
when someone can actually look at you in the face. So being able to say something when it's dark and you have that kind of shadowed, cocoon kind of natural feeling, they talk more. And so that waiting until after dark, it doesn't have to be midnight or 1 a.m., maybe it's 11 o'clock. But my college age daughter now, she still does it. She still shows up in my room at 12:30, 1 o'clock, or if I'm down here and like, can we talk? Sure. But I have noticed that there is a huge difference. And if it's during the light of day and I can tell one of them wants to talk about something, I've taken them to a darker room, just a room that I would normally turn a light on. And we go in there and we talk and I leave it off and they talk more.
Mm.
And so I started looking back going, okay, now I get it. On the way there, they have all this stuff going on. Dark happens, they're exhausted. Now they just want to talk and just vent. And it's like verbal vomit because they're just letting go of everything they're thinking and feeling and their experiences. And it's just coming out one after another after another. So, a little note to any parent: if you are still in that horrible taxi driver stage, enjoy it, ignore them on the way there, but on the way back when it's nice and dark, listen. You will learn so much about your kid and about just what's going on in general in the world around
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was gonna say that exact thing. Is one of the things
them.
when you look back after your kids are grown and out of the house like mine are, is that taxi season, you think this is the worst thing ever. I cannot wait until my kids get their driver's license or don't need me to drive them around. But when you start driving around in your car by yourself and you no longer have those opportunities, myself and then so many moms that I've worked with as well, they say that exact same thing. So taking advantage, and that's part of that shoulder to shoulder conversation too that we say is so much easier when they're not having to look you in the eye. So you have that opportunity. And I think you had mentioned before too about when their friends are in the car as well and they're having conversations, your ears are open and you're listening. Now, do you recommend like asking questions or giving advice, or are you just listening?
Um, it really depends on where you're at with your relationship with your kid. So there have been times where, you know, my daughter and I were not getting along. So for me to pipe up and say, okay, girls, let me just make a little suggestion, it was not going to go over well at all. But when she and I were really jiving and everything was kind of going pretty well, what was interesting is she started bringing me into the conversation. She started saying, you know what? My mom's really good at advice about that. Hey, mom, And then the other kids started bringing me in on those conversations.
Mm.
So again, it was kind of, I focused on the relationship with her and I let her kind of lead. And I did plant some seeds, things like when all the kids got out of the car and just she and I were driving home, I'd be like, hey, next time you guys are talking about this, you might want to tell them this, and giving her the advice to share with her friends.
Mm.
And that to her was like, oh, okay, if I do let my mom talk, she's not going to be an idiot. She's going to actually be helpful. And that was a big thing. Now, the shoulder to shoulder in the car, like you said, is another big one. When it's just the two of you, you're focused on the road. They don't feel like you're watching them or interrogating them or even looking at them. And it's dark out, they will answer those questions that you've been too scared to ask them or that they've always avoided. And what's interesting is that I knew my daughter as my daughter. And during these parenting after dark times, when they first started and they're still going, now I actually am learning who my daughter is.
Mm.
And I have gotten to know her as a person and as an individual, not just as my daughter. And that has probably been the best part of the parenting after dark. Now oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that is beautiful, and I don't know that I've ever heard any parent really say that before, but there is a huge difference, and I think even for us as parents, m who we are as parents, like, I always feel like, "Man, I'm just not that fun because I took parenting so serious," but if I'm around my friends, I'm the life of the party, and I'm laughing, and I'm joking, and, my friends want me to be around. Why don't my kids want me around? Well, because I take this job so serious, and that is reversed as well, who your kids are as a person, not who they are as the child your child, or who you think they should be as your child.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is that you'll start noticing that it works the same way on you. You'll be having that conversation, and your kid's going to ask you those uncomfortable questions that we all have in the back of the head, back of our mind, going, please, please, please don't ever ask me that. Please, please, please don't ever ask me that. And they ask, and that same sense of safety and cocoon from the darkness, you get it too. And you're able to open up to them and let them see and know you. Because when this starts really mattering, like with my 13-year-old son, 12, 13, even 14, I get a little bit out of it doing it with him, but it's more those like 15, 16, 17, 21, those ages where they don't need us to drive them around. We hardly ever see them. I mean, there are days I never saw the girl, but having this open communication and starting to get to know each other is fantastic. And I also armed her with two other things. Well, I've armed all my kids with two more things, and most of them all happen at night. The first one is a family code. And I am a very firm believer in this. You and your family need to come up with some kind of code. Maybe something like, hey, did I put my laundry in the dryer? Or, hey, I forgot to put my laundry in the dryer. Sorry about that. And if your kid sends you that message, okay, they want out of whatever their situation is. And you're going to step in and do that. Why? Because you're going to be the bad guy that your kid needs and that they want. Most of us hate being the bad guy, but you have to give your tween, teen, and even young adult the right and the ability to use you as the bad guy. So whether you get that code or maybe they're at home and, they're on the phone getting invited to something and they show up going, going, please get me out of this. Fine. Start yelling at them, being like, no, you're grounded. You can't go to that. You can't do this. Because who cares if their friends are mad at you? Who cares? But they can't always type in the phrase, I want to leave. Like, this is awful, because while the kids are all so focused on their phone, they somehow can look at each other's phones a lot. Like, it's insane how easily they get caught. And nobody wants to be seen as the lame one that leaves or takes off or doesn't want to go do something. So if they're at home and they're like, oh, I'm grounded, I can't, Mom, can I please? And you just start yelling like, no, no, no. Or you get that phrase on your phone, you need to start blowing up their phone, just angry, and then call them and just start yelling. Like, make it out. They know, they called the SOS. They know this is coming. And when you show up, you pick them up, you stick them in the car, you will watch their whole body go, oh, because they are so grateful. And as many times as they've hated you for being that bad guy, you are the exact bad guy that they desperately need at that age. They need a safe escape button that helps them save face and their rep or whatever in front of their friends. Because I'm sorry, when we were all growing up, kids were mean, but now kids are, I wouldn't grow up in this time. Like, I wouldn't be a tween or a teen right now for all the money in the world. There's just there's no escaping it. And they have to do everything so perfect and by this changing set of cool codes or whatever. So giving them a safe exit is what they need. Now, the other thing that we always do is they get a no questions asked, no questions, no consequences call. Most of us have ended up in the situation where we go somewhere and maybe we weren't supposed to be there or we didn't plan on being there, and our ride is suddenly intoxicated, or where we are is really not where we should be. And we need a way out, but there's no safe way for us to get home. And although kids under 18 can call Uber, Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, if the child is under 18, have the right to say no and not let them into their car. So you can't always count on that. However, the kids know. They pick up the phone and say, I need you to pick me up. You go, you pick them up. Don't ask any questions. Only question you are allowed to ask, are you okay? Now, if you end up having to pick up a couple of their friends as well, you can ask them what their addresses are. But outside of that, you say nothing. Are you okay? And if they say yeah, or even if they're crying and they kind of nod their head, not another word. And you don't talk about it the next day, nothing. In a day or two, you do remind them. I'm glad you were able to use the no questions, no consequences call. If you ever want to talk about what happened, I'm here for you. I will listen with no consequences, no judgment. Just remember that that is an emergency thing, not how you're going to get picked up every weekend or from every party you want to go to. And I found that offering those two things, my kids actually started making better decisions about where they were going, who they were going with, who was going to drive, how they were going to do things, because they appreciated the fact that they knew the help was there, but they didn't, I don't know if they didn't want to feel like they had to do it, but I think it was more of a respect thing. I was showing them respect, giving them ways to get out of situations, and they were showing me respect by trying to not put themselves in those situations. And that made, being the bad guy or doing the no consequences, no questions call even easier for me. If it happened, it wasn't even a thought, because I knew all of this had changed their mindset. They didn't mean to put themselves in that situation.
Wow. I mean, it's just such wisdom. And the last one that you talked about with the no questions, no consequence, that's one that I had heard during that time of parenting them, but I never actually put into place because I didn't have them here. And I always thought, like, would I be able to not ask any questions? But I do love that you do follow up with, well, first asking if they're okay, and then following up a couple days later to say, hey, if you want to talk about it, I am here, just to open that lines of communication. And then also like reminding them, like, this isn't a, you don't just do this. You don't just make these crazy choices and then just know I'm going to come pick you up whenever. But the kids do get themselves. I remember as a teenager myself thinking, okay, this is okay. All the kids are doing it, or my friend's doing this, and my friend makes a bad choice, and now I'm drug into it as well. And that scary feeling of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen here. But to have a caring adult, because I knew, like, I better not call my grandma and tell her that's going on. Like, that would have been absolute trouble. And so
Mhm.
to be able to have someone that I could be like, okay, let me call them, and I know that they'll be there for me and pick me up, and I'll be safe, and not have like, oh, I'm going to be grounded for the next 6 months because of this choice. So just such wisdom there. And now you have something called 1, 2, 3 bully free. And I love
Mhm.
this concept. I wish that I would have known this. I think we kind of used it in our parenting, but not to the genius that you had. And so I want you to share that with us in just a minute. We'll be right back. Hey, have you heard of Get Out Pass? I hadn't either. I saw it on a friend's social media and I had to immediately look to see if my state had it because she lives in a different state than me. I was like, oh heck yeah, where can we sign up? If you are home for the summer and looking for things to do, you want to get yourself a Get Out Pass. You pay one time for each of your family members, a one-time fee, and it gets you in to all of these places around your community for free. It is so worth it. When I heard about this, I began to look into it and I was like, are you kidding me? It costs this much to get into every single one of these places. This is thousands of dollars that we are saving, and now we have the opportunity, because of the one time that we paid, to get into all of these places. These are water parks, climbing places, jumping places, arts and craft areas, boardwalks, theme parks, food type activities. Then I took that list and I sent it to all of my kids and asked them, hey, which one of these things do you want to do? Now I have plans all summer long, even with my adultish children. And of course the grandbaby. These bigger cities are partnered with Get Out Passes. So go and check now. See if you have a city nearby that allows you to use this pass, and then get it for your family. It will pay for itself in 1 to 2 visits. I promise you. And if you're part of our blended family community, use the code BFAM and you get 30% off. You buy it one time and you have all year to go to all of these places one time. Go get it, sign your family up, and do not sit at home this summer with all them kids. Get out the house and make some memories. All right. So, Holly, share with us 1, 2, 3 bully free. It sounds like a slogan you see at school on the posters and all that kind of stuff. But really, when you started breaking it down for me the other day, I was like, if all the parents knew this, all the parents do need to know this. We're going to share it with as many parents as we can. So, tell us about the 1, 2, 3 bully free.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick though, I did want to let you know, for the no questions, no consequences call, we still offer that to our adult children because they live, somewhat close by. And even though they're 21, and 24, they could still get into a bad situation. And we want them to know that it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always call us and we will help you however we can. But anyway, so the 1, 2, 3 bully free. Now, a few years, probably 10 years ago or more, I found a book. It was called The Drama Years. And it's about this female psychologist. She talks about girls, especially in those tween and teen years, because it's a hard time for girls. It really is. Our bodies are changing, our hormones are changing. Yes, it happens for boys, but it is not on the same level. And I can say that because I've gone through 4 girls and 3 boys. But it is insane. And girls, especially, can be very, very evil to one another. And it's heartbreaking. So 1, 2, 3 bully free, or at least prepped. The idea is that you want to give your kids the best way to avoid or be isolated from bullying that we know happens everywhere. And we don't always see it. It's not at school, with notes or things being thrown at them. It's on secret chat rooms and all of these other places that we can't get to. So the rule of 3, and this has been a non-negotiable. We prefer to start in junior high, but if they can't, because there are some limitations as far as what junior highs offer, it's a must, it's an absolute requirement for high school. The rule of 3. 1, they must participate in one inside of school activity, some kind of group, club, whatever, that has a teacher advisor that they, on whatever. I don't care what they're doing, just something. The second thing they have to do is they have to be involved in some kind of group or activity or whatever outside of school. And that outside of school activity cannot be made up of only people from school. It needs to be different people. And the third thing is they have to be involved in something that's physical. Now, the reason for this is at some point, whether you have a boy or a girl or whatever, your child is going to show up at school and everyone's going to hate them. And everyone's going to be bullying them and being mean, and they're going to have no idea why. And it is soul crushing to them and as a parent. But if they're doing those 3 things, they have 3 layers of protection. The first one is that group within school. They have those closer relationships that are probably not going to be participating in that school-wide, oh, I hate you. And they have a close relationship with a trusted teacher on site that they can go to, that knows them, that they are comfortable with. Their second layer of protection is that group that they have outside of school. When they find out what's going on, those kids close rank around each other like nothing you've ever seen. And the third thing is they're doing something physical. So that stress and that fear and that anxiety and that heartbreak, they can sweat it out. Now, what's also going to happen at some point, they're going to show up to that out of school thing and everyone there is going to hate them. They're not going to know why, or maybe they do, but it still happens. And it's the same concept. They have the people inside school, they have their friends at school, they have, some kind of exercise. And that's how you can kind of protect your kids. Put those 3 layers of, different bubble wrap around them, because the likelihood is nobody's going to be able to penetrate all 3 of those layers to get to your kid's heart and soul and mind, because those things are so sensitive at this age and at this time in their life. Now, doesn't always have to be 3 separate things. So for instance, when my daughter was in school, she was a competitive dancer. So her outside of school activity was dance. So it crossed off her physical and out of school activity. And then in school, she had several different organizations she was part of. For my son, it's going to be, he's playing football for the high school. So that's going to be his kind of in school and physical activity. And then he's going to be joining an organization group kind of thing outside of school. And that, it sounds silly and it sounds weird, but it works because these kids now have a little bit of that buffer. They know that no matter what happens, somewhere in their life, they have people in their corner. And that's going to help them fight against some of that hardship. It also, what I found really interesting is when my daughter was growing up, there were times she hated me for enforcing this rule because she's like, Mom, I'm so busy. Like, this is ridiculous. I hate this. But she went to college. Now, their first year was, 2020 and 2021. So they were mostly just sitting in their dorm rooms. But even since then, she actually seeks out diverse groups of separate friendships because she liked having that. She found so much comfort in being able to nurture different parts of her body and her mind and her, things that filled her cup with different people. She goes out of her way to find it. So she joined a sorority. She's part of a group that's doing an exchange program. She's been a brand rep on campus for something. She's a professional dancer. And that's where she wanted to find all these different little groups. And it has changed her adulthood and her young adulthood. And now the kids that were so angry at us for enforcing this have all come back and said, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, because it helped them then, and then it helps them moving forward. They learn that they don't have to be friends with just the people that are right there in front of their face. They can go find people that can become their people.
Yeah, it's so wise too, because I know with each of my kids, they have struggle with just some of the suicidal thoughts and anxiety, depression, and all of those hormones that come. And then you add on top of it the friendship groups and all of that. And for the situations where it got to the point where there was self harm or suicidal talk, it came down to it came down to a situation where they felt hopeless. They felt like they had nobody in that friend group. Things had gone viral through text messages
Mhm.
and chats or what have you, and they felt like they had nobody to turn to. And when you think everybody is mad at you and in our adult minds, yes, we're like, it's going to be okay. But for them, walking back into a situation when you feel like everybody is attacking you or doesn't want you there anymore, to them, it's life changing. And in an
Mhm.
instant, they can make a decision that they can't turn back on. So I
Yeah.
love this idea that you have of putting these extra layers of protection. So when that friend group at school, say they are part of I know the cheer squad and the dance, like sometimes because so many girls all in one place. I've heard a lot of friends talk about how much drama is in that, and when that drama happens there, they have this outside organization where they're volunteering or helping out or whatever it might be in their youth group, some other group of friends that they can text and be like, "Oh my gosh, this is going on." And they don't have any, those friends don't have any skin in the game, right?
Right.
They don't know what's going on. They're invested in their friend. So that when they hear their side, you're going to, then you rally around them. You speak, words of encouragement, tell them it's going to be okay. You get to talk crap together about whatever and then move on because that situation will pass because it usually always does. And then they'll be friends again, but it gives them that safety net when they're falling in that spot. So just such
Yeah.
wisdom.
And then having that physical activity, I don't think I mentioned, we talked about how it helps them work everything out, sweat it out kind of thing. But it also teaches them that they can have physical activity and fitness in their life every day fairly easily. because they're building that kind of lifestyle and that habit in their mind really early. And what's interesting is that this bully free 1, 2, 3 kind of thing is where the be the bad guy stuff kind of started for me, because it was like, she was all upset, or a few of our kids. If I cancel on this, they're gonna hate me. If I do this, they're gonna hate it. I'm like, fine, use me as the bad guy, because they wanted to avoid that I'm gonna show up and all my friends hate me kind of thing. So while they're different pieces of advice or thought, they connect one another, and all together they create this cushion. Like you said, it's really easy to make a snap decision that you can't undo. And as parents, we don't always see it coming, because there's so much of their life that is digital and hidden. And no matter how much we think we know and we can see it all, we don't.
Yeah.
So all we can do is teach them how to protect themselves the best way we can.
Yeah, and I like because even with the physical activity and the way you talked about it before, it's like we don't have to tell them like maybe they're not athletic. Maybe sports isn't necessarily they don't want to go out for the football team, but there's other physical things that they can do where they're still getting their body moving. There's just it's so endless when you really start looking at it like what are some activities that they can
Badminton,
do.
swimming, tennis. I mean, literally, one of my daughter's friends, she did. She joined the badminton group club just because it was something physical. It got her body moving. I mean,
Yeah, I know my kids, they got into longboarding, they love skateboarding,
mhm,
surfing, cosplay, I think is what they I haven't have seen them at the park. My kids didn't do
mhm,
it, but they're running around with swords and like, acting out and all of that. That's some dance, even if it's not like your in school dance, but going and doing Zumba or something, at your rec center. There's all of these different opportunities. What's the frisbee golf or
mhm.
playing regular golf, like there's so many things. It doesn't have to be my son. He is not an aggressive person. He hates organized sports. He even now, like he's 23 and he's working for a company and they were going and having volleyball days and he loves to go and be a part of the group, but he doesn't like to actually play because he doesn't like the competitiveness. He don't like how angry guys especially get when you make a mistake. And so he doesn't like to put himself in that situation, but he does love to longboard and go out there and get physical in that way or go take a walk in the woods kind of thing. So just getting creative with that as well and not get fixated on it has to be football, basketball, or baseball because that's the main sports that we see in the school systems and stuff. So just
No, I mean, and nowadays though, you can see all sorts of stuff. I mean, my daughter's school had cosplay groups. They had skateboarding groups. They had mountain biking, hiking, rock climbing. Like there's so many different things. It doesn't have to be one of those main sports or whatever. I always told my kids, I don't care what you do, but you have to do something that's going to raise your heart rate and make you sweat a little. So,
yes, such great information, Holly, and I'm so grateful to have you on because I know parents are going to walk away from this with so much information, and I think it's perfect timing going into the summer of finding those times to parent after dark, and don't be afraid to be the bad guy and come up with that family code so that they can text you and that lets you know they need you to intervene without their all of their friends knowing, and then having that no questions asked, like get out of jail free card kind of thing. That in itself is just so much wisdom for us to take as parents in these preteen, teenage, young adult years. But then setting the stage with these 1, 2, 3 bully free as well as you are preparing for your middle schooler to start going into those ages, begin to think and just begin to talk to them about these opportunities so that they can look into those. And we're going to have Holly on again because Holly and I share a mutual, for us, it's a syndrome. Her situation is different from mine in the the extreme, I guess, of it and how it affects her versus how it affects me. But we both have something called Sjogren's, which is an autoimmune, and it affects our lives in all kinds of different crazy ways. And so, as we were just talking and prepping about these podcast episodes and we were sharing information, it affects your life in as a mom in ways that you don't even think, and even as a spouse. And so I told her, okay, we're going to have to do 2 different episodes because these are completely different topics here. So Holly is not going to be a stranger. She's going to come back on here in just a few weeks and have another episode and talk about parenting through a chronic illness and share with us some of the pains of it, and then also some of the beauty of it, and then give us some tips as well as how we can move forward and be the best parent that we can, even with a chronic illness. So Holly, is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up this episode?
No, just I'm really excited, and I hope this is going to help some of the parents. I know this has been a big one, and in fact, offering the bad guy and the no questions asked and things like that to my stepkids made a big difference in our relationship too. Think about that if you are struggling to create that connection. But I'm excited to end up with you on my show, and we will talk soon. But thank you again.
You're welcome. And they can find you on Well Blended Life on Instagram. And then the podcast is The Cook Who Can't Eat, right?
Yes. And the website's just about to go live. I was trying to get all the Cook Who Can't Eat stuff on there, but it's wellblendedlife.com. And I am Well Blended Life on pretty much every social media platform.
Awesome. So yes, go follow her, especially for those life hacks. If you are a life hack junkie like I am, I just love to see those things that make my life easier. And then go check out the podcast, and she shares some yummy recipes too on there. So just go check it out, and then I will let you know when her next episode is coming out as well. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has been a blessing and encouraged your family journey.
Make sure you stay connected with us and join our weekly Blended Family newsletter. We send an email out every Friday morning full of support and encouragement.
And when you join, we also want to give you a free gift. So go get yours today. The link is in the show notes below.
Have an amazing day. Remember to enjoy the journey with your blended family, and we'll see you on the next episode.